Brian Walsh here, and welcome to another one of the 17 keys to entrepreneurial success. So I'm back in New York. I arrived earlier this morning. It is now 10 going on 11 o'clock at night. I've been up since 3 o'clock the previous morning. My daughter, who has been with me for 2 weeks, unfortunately, very sadly, and I do feel rather sad about it, is on her way or probably arriving in Seattle about this time from the New York perspective. And those of you that have started this video series right at the beginning are going to be watching this probably an hour or two after I actually shoot it. But I want to tell you something that I think is critical when it comes to success as a whole. So, interesting thing. Last night, I was in Miami last night, and I launched a campaign. The biggest marketing campaign I've actually ever paid for. A massive campaign. We're spending, I don't want to tell you, it's crazy money. And, yet I was on holiday with my daughter for the last 2 weeks. And I spent, because I was a little bit pre-organized. Instead of waiting until last night, I spent the night before when we went to bed and Kayla went to sleep. And I put together this whole system and this whole process for this campaign to launch. And it launched very well. And it's actually performing exceptionally well. Now, how did that actually happen? Well, simple, something called planning. All right, when I was sitting 2 weeks ago, just before Kayla got here, for the first few days I was in New York, I sat down and I created this entire campaign, this entire structure, this entire process, and this whole plan. Step by step, all the communications, all the systems, all the ads, everything laid out so that I knew that I could launch it, because I needed to launch it literally the day before I brought Kayla back to New York so she could fly back to Seattle. And but it was all planned. And I want to tell you something. That planning is one of the most critical things and one of the most underdone things by entrepreneurs as a whole. All right? Because at the end of the day, you will only ever effectively succeed at something that you set a goal towards achieving, that we've been talking about in the last few weeks, right? You'll only ever actually go out and produce those kind of results if you plan. There's that old cliche, if you don't plan, you plan to fail. And to a large degree, that is true. If we just go with the flow, which so often happens, we don't really know where we're going. We don't really know what's working. We're not really on top of things. And I think the thing that gets me the most with this is, my original mentor, my first mentor, Tony Robbins, used to talk about this concept called the success formula. And the success formula went: know what you want, take massive persistent action, notice your outcomes, and change your approach where you're not getting the outcomes that you want. And so many people, firstly, a lot of people, you might think it's strange that we start with know what you want. Most people actually don't have a clue what they want. All right, they really, really struggle with that as a concept. They kind of know what they don't want, and they tend to focus on that. But the truth is, they don't know exactly what it is that they want. They also, yes, maybe some of us take massive persistent action, but in what direction? And what are we monitoring it against? Because when we plan, we come up with a strategy of actions and activities and strategies that we're going to do towards achieving a particular outcome and goal. We then action it, but then we notice the outcome, as Tony would say, right? And in this day and age, we can measure so much. So we can measure we're doing this and this is happening. I've been sitting, when I was at the airport earlier with Kayla, and this evening, I've been looking at stats and I've been measuring all these different equations that are determining how effectively the marketing campaign's working. And where things aren't working so well, I remember last week we were making adjustments, and here I'm making slight adjustments in order to maximize the outcome. Listen, guys, I can talk about this forever, but I want you to understand that planning is a critical component to achieving success as a real entrepreneur. And a base plan should always be this: what is your primary goals? So define the goals. What are the strategies that are going to help you achieve those goals? Or what I like to say, I often like to say, the goals become the major moves, okay, or the major projects that you want to look at if you're doing a long-term plan, like a one-year plan. Then your major moves of each project, okay, which is identifying the 4 or 5 critical things towards taking that project. But to simplify it, what are your primary goals? What are the strategies you're going to use towards achieving it? What are the actions you're going to take towards making those strategies a reality? And you want to make sure there's dates associated to the actions, and you want to make sure that those actions are allocated to people so that you have something to measure against and somebody that's responsible for action on action, and there's a timeline accordingly with it. When we put this together for any aspect that we want to shift or change in our business, we have a tool, and it's a very, very powerful tool to help us and ensure that we get to the end goal. Because so often we go way off track in all different directions. But if we have the clarity of the end goal, if we notice in the outcomes, making adjustments on a continuous basis, the odds are we'll hit that end goal. And that's what it's all about. So please, success is not just a mindset. Success is not just thinking like a successful person. Success is acting like a successful person. So in the previous keys, I hope you've been taking notes and hope you've been working out those different factors we brought into play. When we spoke about knowing what your major moves were towards your goal, this becomes a great outline potentially for what your major goal should be in terms of your objectives over a year. Just use this all in sort of cohorts with each other in order to maximize your outcomes as a whole. Listen, it's Brian Walsh. I can waffle on about this forever. I need to get some sleep. So I hope you get some value out of this. Please plan, measure, check your outcomes, adjust to maximize the results that you get in your life as a whole. I'll catch you in the next of the 17 keys to entrepreneurial success in a couple of days' time. Ciao for now.